The Galien Foundation fosters, recognizes, and rewards excellence in scientific innovation to improve the human condition.
André Malraux said once in one of his novels, "Une vie humaine ne vaut rien, mais rien ne vaut une vie humaine." Human life is worth nothing, but nothing is worth a human life. All these men and women are trying to save human lives. Is there anything more noble than that?
The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotechnology Product, Best Product for Orphan Rare Diseases, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Incubator, Accelerator, Equity, Best Startup. Around the globe, the Prix Galien is considered as the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for the industry, mobilizing an unrivaled network of Nobel laureates and top biomedical scientists. The Galien Foundation manages an independent, cross-functional, and geographically diverse program of events and sponsorship to brand the best of the best in new medicines and diagnostics. The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award for Global Health Equity is bestowed to an individual, a company, an academic institution, or a non-governmental agency that has helped to improve the human condition through the application of biopharmaceutical science to problems of developing or underserved populations worldwide.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
Staging this event in Africa is a significant statement that science and innovation are needed as much here in Africa as anywhere else.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Gil Bash, and I am your host, your moderator for this very special webinar from the Galien Foundation. The Galien Foundation, as you've heard just a few moments ago, is the equivalent to the Academy Award, the Nobel Prize in Life Sciences. And it's because the judges who make the ultimate decisions are they themselves Nobel Prize laureates. I want to congratulate the finalists who are on this webinar. It's an incredible honor for me to moderate a conversation among them. It's not the first conversation we've had. Actually, we've been talking about what brought them to Galien, what brought them to such global prominence, and I want to thank them. This year, 2023, was an outstanding year for the foundation. We actually had more than 176 nominees for our 7 categories from 169 companies across 18 diverse therapeutic areas. They range from cancer, cardiology, neurosciences, infectious disease, and very rare genetic diseases and vaccines. And our judging committee looks very closely at all of the nominations to determine who shall be a finalist. You're about to hear from actually 5 of the finalists in the Incubator, Accelerator, and Equity category. And I'll talk in a few moments of why these champions of innovation are so important to the future of public health around the world. This is the first of 2 webinars. The second webinar will follow this one, and it is moderated by my friend and fellow Galien Foundation fan and advisory board member, Ron Cohen of Accorda. So let me talk a little bit about this particular group, and let me share with you why in this conversation, if you're listening closely, you have the opportunity to build out your business plan, to connect with a group of people who are extraordinary in their work. These people understand the complexities, the fragmentation, and the challenges of the health ecosystem. They understand the dynamic between payer and provider. They understand the challenges between provider and policymaker, and they champion day in and day out product innovators. So for those of you who are from the product innovation sector, listen very closely. From those of you who are from the provider sector, listen extra closely, because these are the people who may open the door to change that can sustain and save human lives. Now, you've just had the poll. The poll results will be provided at the very, very end of this conversation. I've seen some of the other webinars, by the way. I have a sense of the trend, but I'm eager to see how you decided what was going on. I want to spend a few moments introducing my colleagues, my industry colleagues, who are finalists for the Galien Foundation. And I ask you, if you're listening, take a picture of these people, print screen and share on the Galien Foundation X Twitter handle or LinkedIn handles. Link into these people, most certainly. Follow these people. These are the brains driving the category. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about why we started last year the Incubator, Accelerator, and Equity Award. Some of the greatest ideas are happening right now. They're not only from big companies, the companies like Merck or Pfizer or Bristol Myers Squibb, or health innovators like Amylyx, other companies, all nominated for Galien Awards in their categories. Not Medtronic, medical devices, Edwards, and so forth. These are great companies, no doubt about it. But right now, there's a small team, perhaps of 3 or 30 people, thinking about an idea that they want to bring to the marketplace. What they do next, the decisions they make, will very well determine their success or failure. And these are the people, the lifesavers, who can make a difference. So I'm going to introduce them. We're going to engage in conversation. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce a last name. I ask them to stop immediately and correct. And Danina, I start with you. And actually, my comment was directed toward you. So please correct us all, because I want to make sure people connect. Danina Kapovic, is that close?
Danina Kapitanovic.
Kapitanovic. Thank you, Danina.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Danina is based in Montreal. She's the Chief Innovation Officer of Orot. You see the O and the T behind her, obviously behind, there you go. Orot actually is a wonderful meeting. It translates into illumination, light, and as in her role as Chief Innovation Officer, she leads the Connected Health Incubator at CIUSSS in West Central Montreal. She's really in the forefront of transforming healthcare through innovation, tapping medical technologies to make health more accessible, more meaningful, more practical. And she has a special superpower. Maybe she'll discuss it during the call today. She champions collaboration among clinicians, researchers, healthcare users, entrepreneurs, to create human-centered approaches to some of our big health problems. Danina, thank you so much for joining us. I also want to welcome Dr. Jean Morse. Jean brings a unique skill to the table. I've always believed that pharmacists are really the connectors of the system. They are quiet champions. Dr. Morse is a pharmacist in training. He's a distinguished professor of pharmacy practice at the University of Buffalo School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. He's more than that, I might add. Dr. Morse, Jean, has been a champion for global public health for many, many years. He's working with international partners to build infectious disease research centers in Jamaica and Zimbabwe. He's the champion for the Center of Integrated Global biomedical sciences at the University of Buffalo, championing their innovation work. And Jean looks at the practical aspects of the work, not just in the state of New York, but around the world. Jean, thank you so very much for joining us today. Konrad Dobschitz leads the National Health Services NHS Innovation Accelerator. And his work is very critical. It's national. Obviously, the UK health system is recognized as one of the world's great public health systems, but his work is global because the UK is seeking to incorporate the best of the best from around the world into Britain's health system. So he has the experience. He actually comes from a background working globally before joining NHS. And I want to thank him for joining us because NHS is very much a model for where other systems seek to study. And we'll find out today what they're doing in innovation and incubation. And also, I want to welcome Dr. Stephen Lester. Stephen is a noted cardiologist. He is with the Department of Cardiovascular Medicine at Mayo Clinic in Arizona. He has been an associate medical director of the Mayo Clinical Enterprise Department of Business Development and Contract Payer Relations. It's a very unique position he plays in terms of championing their incubator, because actually Mayo is considered one of this nation's great health systems. He has an amazing clinical background. Heart disease is the number one killer of men and women around the world. He doesn't limit himself just to heart disease, but obviously he is seeking to champion innovation around the world. I believe we'll be joined later in our conversation, I believe, by Melinda Richter, the founder of Johnson & Johnson's innovation center called J-Labs, and we'll look forward to seeing Melinda as we progress. So I want to jump right into the question and start with Danina and Jean. I'm going to ask you to pay close attention to this question and Danina's thoughts, because I think this is something very close to your heart. You know, from my own experience in private equity, I've often found that people are chasing dollars. They have an idea, they want to run after the money. They obviously have a runway. They need money desperately. But sometimes I feel that they're putting the cart before the horse. They're not gaining enough knowledge about the complex health ecosystem, and they start with solutions for which they're not really certain what the problem is. I would very much appreciate your in-depth thought about why incubators and accelerators are vital to the future of public health.
Thank you for that question, Gil. It is at the essence of what our Connected Health Incubator stands for. So very much along the lines of what you pointed out, the reason we have thought that creating an incubator inside an integrated healthcare network was not only a good idea, but really essential, is because we have observed, we recognize the tremendous opportunity that the technology presents in order to transform healthcare, in order to preserve it in the case of great public health systems such as the Canadian one. However, the technologies that we find out there are very much solutions looking for problems to solve, when it really should be the other way around. And so in an ecosystem where we do have a number of traditional, and I underline this word carefully, traditional incubators and accelerators, we find that there's that over focus on the business side of things without paying as much attention to validating the need and understanding the complexity of healthcare, and hence the need for this unique type of incubator that works in concert with incubators that help companies strengthen the business side of things, but really connects them with the clinicians, connects them with the users, with the express desire to validate the needs that they are looking to resolve. And then in close collaboration with these stakeholders, develop the technology that really fits the need and is developed with keen understanding of the enormous complexity that working in a healthcare system brings. It also highlights the sort of the types of ecosystem that we are trying to build. Long gone are the days of, medtech of yore, where you got to plug something into the wall and it worked. We are right now in the realm of technologies that, in order for them to fulfill their promise and optimize operations and optimize outcomes, they have to work in concert. They have to be interoperable and interconnected. Young companies have to understand that complexity. And then lastly, I would say, from the business modeling perspective, in a global marketplace, various healthcare systems work very differently. And so helping companies understand the flow of money, helping companies keenly understand what is the value add of their technology, helps them also come up with business models that make sense, that are suited for particular markets. So
that's great, Janina. I want to grab that. I want to grab that and jump to Jean for a second, because you said something that I thought was so important. Understand the complexities of the system itself. And Jean, you have that charge, and you're working on a global level as well. And I'd love to get your sort of dual split screen thinking about this, because your center is covering a great swath of a state, and you're also covering a world. When you try to split screen what Janina just shared with us, with your state responsibilities and your global responsibilities, how does it differ?
Well, I think the points that were highlighted are incredibly critical to any company that's trying to make its way forward with a technology. But I think what the world has been experiencing is primarily things related to health inequities. And I think that is very much related to the strategies of companies to develop. So what we can do in New York is actually build models where companies and academic environments can accelerate the growth of a company, but we can actually use regions within the state to identify underserved areas that may reflect the same situations we might run into in low and middle income countries around the world. So we see local is global, and global can be local. And we see the benefit to companies that might only see themselves as working in New York State, but they actually could have a global market. So once you go to the global side, it then requires new sensitivities for a given country's economic situations, the politics, how things are, kind of transitioning over the lifetime that a new technology wants to be introduced. So our center, the idea of integrating global biomedical sciences, is one that can do things in parallel. And we also realized along the way that we need business models. So we've brought in our School of Management to help the idea of sustainability. So all of our projects, while they have the initial incubation and product development, have a sustainable model in the countries that we work in.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for that. Now, I want to just pop over to Conrad, because to some extent, his situation encompasses yours. The UK is a very complex demographic community. You have many communities. You have South London, which is to some extent, deals with health disparities. You have other aspects of the country, and NHS has to serve all that. It's very unique when you have a government system in a conversation like this, and you move from Novartis Biome into NHS. So my first part of the question is, you're in industry, you move over into a publicly driven health system, championing innovation as an incubator. Could you share with us a little bit of the nuance? Because I'm sure it wasn't like, oh, sure, I did Novartis Biome, I'll certainly understand NHS in a blink. I think we'd all be curious to sort of get your perspective of the difference between the pharma side and the public health side, And a person who I'll introduce in a few moments, who just joined us, Melinda Richter. I'm going to sort of ask you to jump in because she's really one of the pioneers of the incubator accelerator field very early on, from a corporate side, most certainly. And I'll turn to her and get her perspective. So Conrad, could you tell me a little bit about the differences you saw and the complexities, to Jean's point, of health disparities?
Sure.
As we deal with your bandwidth. And Jean, or this is a very clever ploy of, let me think about that for a few moments and I'll get back to you. I always appreciate that very thoughtful approach. So we're going to hold on that. We're going to circle back to you. I'm going to flip over to Melinda for a second. And let me just introduce you, Melinda, to everyone here. You're no stranger to the Galien Foundation community. I want to thank you, obviously, for being part of that. You were really one of the founders of Johnson & Johnson's Innovation J Labs organization that connects early stage companies to the resources, expertise, and community that supports their success. So you understood earlier on than many biopharmaceutical companies that there needed to be a change in model of all the people who are banging on big pharma's doors saying, help me, help me. And Conrad, thank you for being back. We're going to get back to you in a second. I just explained to our audience today that you said to yourself, that's a tough question. I'm going to pretend I'm frozen and I'll come back. I think about it. So hang on. We're going to get back to you in a second. Melinda, your thoughts about this, please.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. And I am so proud to be here amongst these illustrious colleagues of mine in this marketplace. Everything that everybody is doing here is in service of reaching more patients, of reaching all patients. So it's really important that we celebrate this category and that we celebrate everybody who's dedicated to doing this. I mean, it is a tremendous amount of courage to go in and support these innovators. So thank you all for everything that you do. Yes, it was something that I came to as a conclusion very early on, before it was in vogue, only because I had been a patient. I'd actually been in the tech industry and I experienced how the system works or didn't work. And I decided that if I got the chance to stay here on this planet, which was seemingly the option at the time, not really an option, that I wanted to make healthcare innovation just as productive and as efficient and beneficial for its customers, the patients, as incubation acceleration had been in the tech industry. And so together with Johnson & Johnson, we created this new model that was really about how do we create efficiencies for early stage companies who are facing a real uphill battle. It's so expensive, it's so risky, and the probability of you reaching all the way to patients is so small that really we needed to give them every possible edge to get there. And so we started off as a pilot in San Diego, and we quickly grew over the last 10 years to 14 sites all over the world. And most recently with Singapore added. We service about 1,000 companies at the moment who've done about $100 billion worth of deals, of which, by the way, about a quarter of that was just happened this year.
And Melinda, could you share with us a little bit about the unique aspects of an approach similar to what we heard from Danina and Jean? The philosophy that you have, I think, is really the most important thing that we need at this moment.
So from a philosophical perspective, our job is to embed ourselves in local ecosystems around the world to find the most promising entrepreneurs and technologies that can have the most amount of impact for patients all over the world. And in doing so, how do we take down all of those hurdles that would help them to be or stop them from being successful? But to something Jean was saying earlier, we've also noted a change that's happened over the past few years, which is innovators can't afford just to be local anymore. They have to be global. They have to be thinking about the world's populations, and not only which world's populations in which regions, but also which populations are being affected adversely and why is that, and how do we help those solutions get to market because those patient populations aren't being served.
That's
So
a
we,
great, yeah,
yeah,
that's
we
a great,
think
that's a great
grander
point.
purpose than what you would think, in a very focused way.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, Conrad, we're back with you, and you've got now Melinda's perspective as well about, sort of this concept of going global. So to some extent, I wonder, are you at times doing the opposite, which is, hey, our perspective is global to improve the well-being of people participating in the NHS health system. So you are global, but the lens is reversed, perhaps. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty correct. And I'm hoping I'm not freezing now, so I'm going to be quick. So first, you asked before the question, the change from pharma to the NHS, which is publicly funded. And I thought you would wonder why I did do that. And I think the key motivation was to be closer to patients and actually closer to change of public health. And that's not a dig at Melinda and J Labs. That is more me personally, the motivation wanting to be just closer to the ground. So after leaving Novartis and the biome there, ultimately, I think it's all in the translation, right? So what pharma is doing, what the NHS is doing on a global level, we're trying to translate different languages. Pharma language, healthcare language, and startup language, and sometimes VC language as well, because they don't understand each other. They probably never will, really. So in pharma, I tried, and we did a variety of projects that worked on a global level in the US, in Europe, and that was all great. But ultimately, these ended up as pilots and what we call pilotitis, right? So you need true scale to change how we look at global health. And I think that's really important. And to put this point further, a lot of the digital innovation labs in pharma have either been pulled back into the mothership. I think that has happened to J Labs, which is a good thing probably, but also they have been disbanded because some of them, the setup wasn't correct or it didn't work and it didn't produce results. So this is where the NIA, the NHS Innovation Accelerator is different. Our motivation is health improvement. We pull in companies that work global, but also in the UK to predominantly prove healthcare outcomes in the NHS and make our NHS better. And quite frankly, keep it the way it is. That's already better. If you think about in 10 years with the pressures that are on, that's what we have to do. Keep it as good as it is right now. Sometimes people forget that we have a population that is older, everything is going the wrong direction, right? So how do we keep this thing? How do we not have it not fall apart? And you spoke about the pride and joy of the NHS. That's one of my key motivations is keep the show running.
It's good. Can keep the show running, please. Now, I want to switch over to Dr. Lester, and Danina, I'm going to ask you to pay close attention to this. A lot of people, and I took a look at who's on the call right now, and I imagine who's going to be watching this video. A lot of the people want to know why should I approach an incubator or accelerator? Shouldn't I jump to the third aspect, like knock on the doors of private equity groups, large and small, or even established, angel funders? Why an incubator? Why an accelerator? That seems to be a delay in my getting to where I really want to go. I want to develop a product. I want to get it reviewed by a regulatory group, and I want to get out there and start selling. And yet, in this category, we sort of say, and I think that I think that Conrad said it so well, which is the language of the health ecosystem, the language of the fragmented health ecosystem. And I'd be curious, Dr. Lester, your perspective, if you were to sort of say, here's why anyone listening should consider not tapping on the door of the right incubator or accelerator before they even think about the equity side of this. What would you advise them?
Yeah. First of all, it's an honor to be here as well. And I echo, Melinda, your comments. What a privilege it is to be here with all of you and our colleagues in this ecosystem. So thank you for that question, Gil. And I guess what I would say up front is, what I want to big point is that I'm an optimist, Gil, and I believe that the future is really built by people. So let's use our time, our intellect, our connections to make something great. And in our platform, colleagues, that we really talk about discovering, validating, and then disseminating. And I don't think you can skip a step there. And so at times when within an accelerator program like ours, it is really driven by a vision of collaboration, where collaboration, I say, knows no borders. And it's only through those strategic and collaborative and complementary partnerships that accelerators like all of ours help to redefine the borders or boundaries of what's really achievable in healthcare. So when you come to a program like all of ours, you will then be able to potentially validate clinically your problem, your service, your solution that then can be disseminated into the healthcare ecosystem. Because, if company X, Y, or Z has an idea, a product, or a service, and you're trying to disseminate it to the global population, there is a concept of trust. Like, how do you trust that it does what it says it does? And I think programs like ours help to validate and put trust into the equation, so that when that system has been disseminated, it's been validated in Buffalo, it's been validated in Montreal, it's been validated in Mayo Clinic or whatever. And I think that helps to support that. And also, Gil, I'll make why I promised to make it is the notion of the strategic connections that I think we all can bring to those partners, in particular into the payer marketplace or into the venture side of things when it gets to that stage, but that it is coming together to work and collaborate to create next generation products, services, and solutions. And I think coming into any of these programs, you'd find great accelerant to what you're trying to do, either to accelerate your in-market or go-to-market strategies, and then to support disseminating those globally. So whether you're from Europe,
I'm going to grab something you just said and ask Danina a little bit about this, because you have some packed gems in your sort of like calm counsel. Often, Danina, when I'm meeting with earlier stage enterprises, and I ask them a very question, a question they should be able to answer. I'm sure each of our panelists have been sort of thought about this, which is, I ask them, and who do you think will pay for this? Now, where is it going to be paid for by the public or private payer? Is it going to be a direct to patient? Is it going to be embedded in the United States system by the hospital system to guard their reimbursement under what's called DRGs? And they often look at me like they come up with an answer, and they haven't really thought it through. And obviously you're taking a broad perspective on this. I'd be curious to know, of the companies that approach you and you embrace and accept into the program, how many of them really have an understanding of the reimbursement or payment system or the making money system of the complex healthcare environment? And how much of your time is dedicated toward helping them kind of like develop the engineering side of the idea, as opposed to understanding the payer and policy side of the idea? And I put this out there, and Jean, you're dealing with this on a global basis as well. Of how will these companies be sustainable? So I'm going to turn to you, Jean, just a moment on that. But Danina, how many come to you with some really keen knowledge about how they're going to make money?
Very few. And I don't mean to be overly demoralizing or negative, but very, very few. And hence the, again, raison d'etre of this particular structure inside Healthcare Network. I'll emphasize that we support just because there's the reality of the world, and I'll emphasize that again, it is very much a reality in which solutions are looking for problems to solve and not the other way around. So we're looking to take gadgets and fit them somewhere, and so the idea here is really to shift that. So we accompany enterprises, innovators, companies throughout the cycle of innovation. So they can approach us very, very early on when they are kind of thinking about it, and then we offer them opportunity to validate and co-develop their technology. They can also approach it as at a stage where they're looking to validate and evaluate their technology. They can also approach us, very, post commercialization if the common thread, the caveat is that it has to answer a need as perceived by our users, be they clinicians or patients. And so throughout this, as we are supporting them throughout the cycle, the notion of value is something that we hold dearest and at the front of the conversations that we are having. So right after, does your solution answer a particular need? The question that poses itself then is, how does it create value? And the discourse that you have mentioned you're having with enterprises is the one that we are having. Slightly reformulated. My question to them is, who's your client and who's your customer? Because in healthcare, very frequently, people who will be using your technology, and they could be a multitude of different categories of users, are not the people that are going to be paying for them. And so having a keen understanding of how the money flows in a particular system, and again, I work within a publicly funded healthcare system. It is crucial. The reason incubators have a role to play, it's not necessarily information that is readily available. So it's not to think that companies are lazy for not, thinking about this notion. It's just that it's the kind of information that is actually really hard to access. And so having a point of entry into healthcare system and having teams of what I like to call innovation Sherpas, people who sort of accompany them and kind of give that gentle sort of motivating push all throughout, motivated by the idea of the healthcare transformation, ultimate improvement in satisfaction and in results and outcomes, and at an affordable price is absolutely essential.
Thank you. You said something that I think is so critical, because you're really looking to infuse a sense of knowledge of process, policy, and payment. And Jean, in your world, here you are, you're based in Buffalo, you're looking to the world, and particularly, if I understand correctly, emerging nations that have very pressing health needs. I'm wondering how you reconcile your sort of like New York State, US, and emerging nation philosophy. You personally and your team have to juggle all three. Could you share with us, though, a little bit about when you're looking at the emerging nations as an incubator accelerator? Are there any different thoughts that go on? I know the Zimbabwe health system is certainly different than New York State Medicare and Medicaid. So what's your advice to listeners?
That's a complicated question. I can tell you.
I know, but I asked a really brilliant guy, so I figured it's kind of a no-brainer.
So one of the things I've discovered in many of the countries that I work is that many people would like to extract compounds out of plants and make them into potential sources for pharmaceutical industry. And the idea there is incredible. But the idea that what you need in terms of a modern laboratory, the ability to collect data, the ability to do pharmaceutical development products, get it to areas that need those products. That's all got to be in the thinking for that group, whether it's a company or a country that wants to make this, their focus of activities. So we can bring that type of knowledge from the things that we've learned on the US and Europe and many places where pharmaceutical industry has flourished. And we can kind of use a term that they use, which is leapfrogging. We can go over all of the things where we made the errors and try to give them a plan that will be successful. And as far as getting money to do these things, global health has really kind of now morphed into conversations with climate change, alternative energy, innovative agriculture, because all of those things will eventually shift where money goes. and make more money available for global health and the types of things that are needed. So we see great value in bringing experience from our side so that plans can be developed that will be successful, because many times those plans are competing with a new road to the airport or a new water system facility. So we've got to be able to help them with the business models to be able to show if we do this, we can reduce that. And that's where we found a lot of acceptance and people wanting to move forward that
So,
way.
Gene, just to clarify for our listeners, I want to make sure I get this right. You're not only are you looking at this from a pharmacological support level in terms of providing that support on the incubator level, you're also looking at this in terms of the global systems aspect, whether UN, the United Nations may have funding, or COP28 teams may have funding. You're looking at this in the both the public policy and global health sense. Is that correct?
Definitely. I think until you've worked really hard to get, for example, an electronic health record into a clinic, only to find out that the power goes out at night, you really don't have an appreciation for the integrated approach that's needed. And there are a lot of funders that want to participate, including the World Bank and those types of groups. So I think equity is a great source, but there's kind of a combination that we propose when we're developing a project.
A new insight.
Again, our goal is that sustainable development piece.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Conrad and Melinda right now with a question I want to share with them. You're probably, both of you are approached 100 times a day by aspiring innovators who have ideas they're passionate about, and I want to ask you a tough question, but I think it's a tough question that will benefit our listeners now and into the future. You probably have a moment where your heartstrings are being sort of like pulled on you. You just feel for these people. I mean, you feel for their passion, the problems they're trying to solve, and yet, I always say in the equity side, we're dealing with time, money, and opportunity. We have to balance those three things. So I want to ask you an important, difficult question. Conrad, I'll start with you first. Melinda, I'm going to ask you for your perspective. You really have a pioneering perspective, Melinda. So you've been having more people bang on your doors that probably have dents in them. But I wanted to ask you the question of the no. When you have to make a tough decision, when someone approaches you, you've sat through with your team, you've heard their pitch, the PowerPoint goes down, you ask polite questions, they leave the room, they thought it was a great meeting, and then you have to make a no decision. And I wanted to ask if you could share what are the 4 or 5 considerations quickly around the no. Conrad, you first.
Sure, I'm happy to. And I'm sure Melinda has some interesting viewpoints as well, also from a sort of P&L standpoint, because in the NHS, there's no P&L. It sounds a bit weird, right? But our P&L is our patients, essentially. And I'm just to clarify, I'm not employed by the NHS. I'm commissioned by the NHS. Just wanted to say that. So ultimately, we've got a recruitment process that is still on, by the way. People can still apply until this week, Friday, to be part of the NIA. You can find that online, NIA NHS, and then just apply. I joined a year ago, and I was in the panels, and I sat there, and I had to say no to people. And it sucks, because ultimately, these people put all of their heart in there, and it's their business. Right? Who am I to sit there and tell them that their stuff is not good enough? That's just really tough. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is we've got a 5-month assessment process with clinicians, commercial people, because we're free to join and we never charge, we don't take equity. So what we have to produce at the end is impact on the ground for patients and staff. So that's where we produce value for system. So we have to say no. And we have to say no almost purely on the solution. Does that solution have legs? Does it stick? And can it move the needle in the NHS and internationally as well, but NHS first? Really? Or is this just another idea from two people in a shed? That's not who we are. Our staff, our solution, our fellows are further down the line. They're like after seed, which I know is not too much, but some of them are Series A founders already. So what they want is market access. They want us to open doors for them, and they want maybe gather more real-world evidence, right? But the stuff needs to work. And frankly, it needs to fit a need, to the Nina's point, right? What's the problem we're trying to solve for? And how often we have stuff that doesn't fix anything but the founder's problem. So we do this, we share the feedback from the people who have gone through the last stage of our interview process, and they get a complete set of feedback. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 pages. They get it all. How does that help them? We all know, right? They can next year, they can apply again if they don't decide not to because they're disappointed, which is fine, but they can develop their stuff further. Right? We give them that. And I think that's the least we can give them, because last word to this, I have such a great respect. I've run my own company for 6-7 years in fashion and retail. I don't look like it, I know. But ultimately, we owe them their feedback because they came to us and applied and wanted to work with us. It's their stuff. So we need to respect them.
Well, Conrad, I'll respond to your fashion and retail and your quip with an adage: lions don't need to roar. You're obviously a fashionista because you don't need to appear as a fashionista. So we obviously know that you are one, and I thank you for that. And Belinda, you're really one of the pioneers in this area when you moved J&J into a structured system. And obviously you have built a global team. You talked about that earlier, but you obviously have to set standards. You have to draw the line. And I'm very curious from your experience and your expertise, which is expansive, the no. I mean, at what point do you just, when they leave the room, you shake their hands and you look at each other in the room and you just say no? What are the reasons why it's like no?
Well, let's talk about what we look for, and then we can talk about why we would say no. So first, we're looking for either a very big and or important unmet medical need. So what are they going after? And then second, is their science and technology transformational? Is it, if it's a me too, it's never going to go anywhere. Is it transformational? Then that's something we're interested in. And do they have an important critical next step, like that killer experiment that's going to give them the data they need to know whether to go forward or not? And then do they have credibility in the team? And the team, and we also look for diversity in the team. Do they have the credibility to pull this off? Now, that doesn't mean they have to be a serial scientific founder who's had successful exits. Sure, that's gold-plated, but are they also expert in the field? Are they very passionate? Are they surrounded themselves with advisors to help them get along the way? Great. And then we also look for, can we help them? Can we be of service to them to help them reach their goals? And so if something fits squarely in all of that, absolutely, you're in. If you're someone who doesn't fit squarely in all of those, that's an easy, like, you're not hitting all these marks. And to Conrad's point, it's on us to share with them feedback that can help them understand, should we continue to move forward with this, or should we place our dollars and time into something else? Because I think that is of service too to the entrepreneurs. And then there's the stuff that fits in the middle. And that's the toughest part, right? Where you kind of got something, but there's some things that are maybe critically off. But if you fix those things, or if you pivot those things, that could be a winner. And that's where it's so important we get back to them with, here's what we're thinking about this. And let me lay the context for this. When people are across J&J look at these technologies, we bring in experts in that micro field. So we go down into, like, if it's cell and gene therapy. It's cell and gene therapy. It's the manufacturing, it's supply chain. It's like the people who are deep, deep, deep experts in that space. And we'll also bring it from a couple of different perspectives. So there's never usually just one expert, right? There's a platform expert, there's a manufacturing, there's the R&D. So we'll bring them all into the space. And so when we're hearing from them, actually, we may not even get a uniform answer from all of them, but we'll get some sort of a response that's either yes, no, or it's in between. And here's the feedback. Come back to us in a few months and let us know if you've progressed along this chain. So we're all about second chances, third chances, fourth chances. And
That's
sometimes
wonderful.
we're wrong too.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible. It's encouraging, and I think that you are celebrating the innovative idea, all of you, and I want to thank you for that. Before we begin to wrap up, I want to first of all again acknowledge you. To be a finalist in the Galien Foundation is not unlike being a nominee for the Academy Award. It is something that you always retain. It is always part of your history. It's a very elite honor, but it really speaks to the life-changing work that each of you are doing within your institutions. I want to thank you for that. I want to acknowledge you. And I think that you are, in many ways, the unsung hero of ideas we hear about later on down the pipeline when they are approved by different regulatory authorities to reach market. And those people are taking all the credit for themselves. They may forget often that there was a cardiologist or a pharmacologist or someone who came from industry to the public service, or someone who's dedicated themselves to the health industry, or someone who pioneered an incubator and an equity group within a big pharmaceutical company. There was someone who said, let's engage our time and energy around this idea, who made it happen. That's you. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. So a last question for each of you. I'm going to start with Dr. Lester, and I would sort of appreciate your candid advice. This is obviously being recorded. It will be shared. It's enduring. It is almost like a mini. In a very quick way, I would really appreciate your providing your counsel to someone who's going to approach you tomorrow, Dr. Lester. If before they approach you, I would value hearing from you what you want from them in terms of having their story or their narrative prepared. What is necessary when they walk into the room, aside from having a really nice PowerPoint deck? What do you expect to see? Very specifically, if you could.
Well, I get the opportunity to go first on this, so let me tell you. So you said a very nice PowerPoint deck. I think we can all allude to it's how you present on that PowerPoint deck. If we want that presentation short, crisp, concise, and to the point, that helps us to identify, what the goal, what the vision, what the mission is of that company, and can our program actually help to develop that product. Two, is the company, we often challenge them, and are they willing, and I think Belinda, you were mentioning this too, but are they willing to iterate based on actionable feedback? Because that's very important when they go through our program. One of the strengths for us at Mayo Clinic and ASU is we have domain expertise in almost any facet of healthcare. So we, like Melinda had mentioned, we will go out and make sure that there's a clinical ideologic link with the domain expert. They should probably be aware of what some of those domain expertise are to show us that they've done some of their homework, they get it, they understand. And then I think the third thing is really understanding that those individuals, we invest, as I said in the beginning, we're investing in people, right? So is it the right team? Have they put the right team composition around them to be successful? We believe very strongly that we can take a C+ product with an A+ team and make it very successful with an organization. But if you flip it around the other way, our experience is that just doesn't work. So those would be the three fundamental things that we look like. Are they buttoned up? Do they really understand the ecosystem they're going to engage in? And will they respond to some sort of actionable items that our team might suggest that they consider?
That's, by the way, that's a shareable. I would get on LinkedIn and put that out as Dr. Stephen Lester's 3 points of critical advice. health innovators. So I'm going to ask. We just have a few moments left, and they cut us off. So in literally one sentence, I'm going to ask each of you. I'm going to start with Danina. One sentence. I'll give you a second to think, and then we'll jump in. If you were to sort of say to a future innovator who's listening into this call, who will be listening to the call, why have persistence and resilience? What would be your advice? Persistence, resilience, what's your advice to them? Danina?
I would say agility. One of the pitfalls is in science in general is because people are so devoted and dedicated and so driven, cause driven. There's a tendency to fall in love with your idea, and then that can get in the way, not just the success of the company, but also its ultimate ability to make a difference. And so remaining agile and open to feedback, from my perspective, is the sort of one of the most important traits.
That's great. That's great advice. Gene, your thought?
Yeah, I'm an optimist, and I encourage people to be persistent because there's so much innovation, but yet the world is not able to achieve the sustainable development goals that we seek as a global community. So I think being persistent and learning more and working with teams to move your technology is a winner. And that's why I encourage people to do that.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Conrad, your advice.
So my advice is contrary to what Danina said. It's I call this the superpower of ignorance. And it is to sometimes put the blinkers on and ignore people left, right, and center that tell you your stuff is no good. Because maybe number 10 is the good idea, and that will fly.
Wow. Thank you for that. Melinda, your advice.
I think it's quite simply said best by Dr. Paul Janssen. And he said, the patients are waiting. That's it. That's why he's.
I think Dr. Paul would appreciate that. At least his bust in the building would appreciate that. And he was a visionary, of course. And I think you're spot on. I think that he was his own public health system in an entrepreneurial way. So that's well said. Dr. Lester, Stephen, to you, what are your thoughts?
Very briefly, I would say that if you're going to be an innovator, you must embrace working within the shades of gray and continue to have that optimistic belief that there are always solutions as long as one continues to strive to achieve them. So if you don't embrace working in the shades of gray, it's probably not the right place for you to be.
This is amazing counsel from the heart that you've offered. I just want to return to, on the behalf of the Galien Foundation, to congratulate each of you. I was privileged to be the co-chair of the judging committee that looked at this category very closely. And I want to say it was brutal. There were 7 members of the judging committee looking at this very, very seriously, sort of assessing your submissions. My only regret is that between this webinar and the next webinar, where we have other finalists, my only regret is we couldn't give out 13 Galien prizes for the category itself, because each one of you is worthy as a finalist to be recognized. I want to salute you. I think society needs to salute you. Many ideas as I look at the entire cascade of Galien, pre-Galien finalists. I have a background on pretty much many of these companies. Even the submissions from the mega companies started in some cases from startups that became part of a bigger enterprise. And through that bigger enterprise relationship, came forth and were able to sustain and save life. You're the conduit to that. You're the champions of that. You understand the decisions that need to be made in order to welcome, shepherd, and bring forth ideas that can improve the human condition. On the behalf of the Galien Foundation, I want to thank each of you and your teams for making this possible. You are truly, as far as the committee is concerned, each an award winner. I also want to invite our audience to stay tuned. The next webinar is part 2 of this conversation. There are some amazing companies, enterprises that have also been selected as finalists. That will be moderated by Dr. Ron Cohen. He sometimes leaves off the MD, but he is a very skilled emergency medicine physician. If you see him at the summit on Thursday or at the gala, I encourage you to ask him about his experience on Jeopardy, where he was a finalist. Few people know about that. He's truly fun and brilliant, and we're thankful to Ron and the entire committee that served to select each of you. With that, I return this to our organizers. Here's the Galien poll week. Fascinating enough, geopolitical risk right now is viewed as the number one challenge facing our industry. Obviously, I'll offer a little color to that, and we'll sign off. Many clinical trials are done in Ukraine and in Israel. And obviously, with the slowdown because of the horrible conflicts in both of those nations, it's impacting the global life science industry. We wish peace on all, obviously sustained and long life to all. Thank you for joining us in the conversation today. Take care and congrats to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.